Welcome back, everyone, to another exciting episode of the Jason Kunen series, which I just named right now. With me is my guest and longtime friend, Jason Kunen. Jason, feel free to introduce yourself and what we're going to be talking about today.
Thanks, Keith. Well, it's the first time I think something's been named after me, so that's exciting.
The Jason Kunen series.
I'm Jason Kunen, a philosophy and religious studies teacher. Experience and background in philosophy, psychology, and meditation. And today we're going to be talking about emotions, sort of part two, and the way emotions shape and affect our life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Jason mentioned this in the last video, and I took a quick note because I knew that it was something we had to talk about, because we talk a lot about how we experience things in our lives that affect us in certain ways. You can go from, thinking about the first time you were inspired as like a young kid and like how much that experience has shaped your life and how much you may sometimes reference that experience. And then you can also look at the negative side where we think about these negative occurrences that may even have changed into biases in our lives now and how that has shaped us. So what Jason and I are going to talk about today is really understanding that power of positivity and negativity and how volatile both of those powers can be and how we can really come to understand them and use them. Because as far as controlling, please reference our first video on how to really control your emotions. But today we're going to really talk about the toolbox we have in being able to control and use both of these positive and negatives to better ourselves.
Yeah, so in the last video, we talked a lot more about negative emotions and sort of the way we sort of watch them and what, learning to embrace them. And so we're going to spend a bit of time today talking about positive emotions as well, which is really important because the reality is, we experience both. And, there are practices. I mean, I know a lot of people are really attracted to what's called loving kindness or metta meditation, in which you develop feelings of kindness and compassion and well-being towards others. And there's another great practice called Tonglen practice, and which the way I understand it is learning to almost, take in, those negative emotions and visualize sort of their opposite of positive emotions. And the way that we visualize and send out those positive emotions to others also affects our own life and the quality of our own life.
Yep. I feel like it's kind of the basic level of attraction and how emotions attract like emotions. And when you express those emotions, you tend to find people and attract those people into your life as well. And once you understand it, it's not as intimidating, but it can be very scary for someone that's realizing this, because sometimes they can come to the realization that they're living, life through a negative lens and they're surrounded by these negative people. And I think the first step is to really accept, like, that was my doing. The world was revolving. I wasn't just, hanging around and let everything happen. Or rather, if you did let everything happen, then that was your decision to let everything happen. And I think once you can accept that, then you can really understand the power of your emotions and how you can use them.
Yeah, that sounds really right to me. I mean, our emotions are really powerful motivators. I mean, why do we do things? And, I just finished doing a grad school class, and we were talking about, it was Vico, who is an Italian philosopher. And, one tiny bit of his work was talking about the way that feelings are really what inspire us to act. So there's something important, right, where you can rationally know something, but it's our feelings that oftentimes are the directors towards actions. And sort of how do we direct the passions towards wholesome things, towards positive things, and we could certainly talk in a moment, about sort of the danger of toxic positivity, which is sort of, I just want to call that out, but sort of not, let's be happy all the time, right? And sort of looking at happiness as a way just to numb ourselves to reality. and sort of a delusional way of, oh, everything's great all the time, right? But sort of learning to find those and create even those moments of joy and inspiration and creativity and kindness.
The ability to understand that we can really bring good into our lives with just the power of our decisions and the power of our emotions. So let's talk about positivity. We love positivity. I love positivity. Let's talk about what you believe are ways that we can nurture that positivity and like continue to have it grow. And I guess in your opinion, if we work on this so much, how does that affect our handling of negativity and negative situations?
I'd like to start actually with a bit of a story, if I could. So,
Yes.
in the in the winter of 2020, we were doing remote classes, and I was in my apartment. It was sort of a series of, week long of, gray, overcast, cold days. Not many people around, and so there was just sort of one day at the end of this long week of what felt like Groundhog Day, where I was washing the dishes after breakfast, and I suddenly just kind of hit me where I was washing the dishes and I go, if I can't find joy right here in this moment and this activity, where is it? And it brought me to something that I have some of my students read, which is the philosopher, he's an existentialist, Jose Ortega y Gasset. And he has this one line in his book, Meditations on Quixote, where he says, I love the stories of those heroes who are marching towards this next great adventure and this quest. And in the meantime, they're trampling along all the flowers. They're totally oblivious to the maiden that is in love with him, etc. And he says, what I think he's saying here is that it's not these sort of great peak moments and experiences in our lives that give us meaning and fulfill us. It's the small everyday moments, sitting by the fire, having a warm meal, with friends, it's walking through the woods, right? And being in nature. And it's these small moments that we can find incredible moments of joy if we know how to look. And I think that's one of the perennial themes of our great wisdom teachers, north, south, east, and west, is that if you know how to look, joy, peace, tranquility, the kingdom of God, whatever phrase of, that you'd like to put there, that it's right here in front of us, if we know how to look and we have the vision to see that.
Yep. I feel like I do that often in my house, where I literally just spend a few minutes, like, at random occasions, especially when I'm feeling very good. I just walk around my place. I look at how much work I put in to make it look nice, to make it look clean, how much work I put in to get to this moment where I can afford a place like this, and I can afford the time that I have to do whatever I want to do. And these are like super small things that, I don't think Jason and I are saying you have to do this every day in order to like nurture this positivity, but when you can find ways to do things like this every day, that's why a big thing for me that I mentioned, and I'm sure Jason's a big advocate for it too, is expressing gratitude like first thing in the morning. I think expressing gratitude in general, but first thing in the morning when you're like, thank you for giving me a day. Like, if that's the first thing you do, then you go through your day like, I'm thankful for today. I'm gonna like do whatever I can. And okay, so I like that. So being able to really understand your now, obviously you want to be grateful that you have a job that you're being paid for, but this is going to seem silly, but I did this once and it was actually pretty interesting. You find a section of your office, hopefully it's like your main office, or if it's like around a lot of people, then go to like a back area and just sit down, sit down in a spot for 5 minutes dedicated to just being thankful that you have a job. And then I think when you start doing that, you start getting into the motion of, am I really thankful for this job? Do I see myself working somewhere else? What do I want to be thankful for if I work somewhere else? And I feel like that's very relieving, because instead of going through the constant struggle of I hate work, and you just attune to that emotion whenever you go into work, you have time to say, okay, like, is this job really that bad? Is it really as stressful as I'm making it out to be? So I feel like that goes into our understanding of emotions, which was in a previous episode. So moving forward with this topic, Jason, can you kind of go into a little more on the use of this positivity when it comes to trying to overcome a negative emotion or situation?
Yeah, well, I mean, let's just sort of pick it up with your practice on gratitude, right? Whether it's the beginning or the end of the day, you know, taking a moment to write down 5 things you're grateful for, right? And what that does is you start to go through the narrative you have about the day you just had, right? Because maybe you say, oh, I had a really hard, really tough, really stressful day. And now you get into this habit, or you start the practice of, okay, yeah, what are 5 things I'm grateful for? Well, now you have to start challenging this narrative that you had a tough and stressful day. And maybe you still did, but you learn to sort of not have the, not have that narrative take over. And again, these practices, learning to stop and take some deep breaths, or practicing gratitude, right? It's the same thing that we've been, hitting on, I think, in the past 2 videos, which is the power of your mind and how you can use your mind, to generate positive emotions. So, which might seem like a strange idea, right? Like, how can my mind generate emotion? But we do that all the time, right? We brought up the example of, okay, somebody does something to you and you're angry, and our thoughts, right? Our thoughts fuel that narrative, and we elicit an emotional reaction from that. We're still angry just by thinking about it. And then that anger, that energy then goes inward again, and that fuels our thoughts, and it creates our cycle. So if our mind can be used to create a negative cycle of emotions, well, we can also be used to generate positive emotions too, right? Of, yeah, what are 5 positive things about this person, right? What's another way I can see the situation, right? And that contributes to empathy, as, okay, maybe this person cut me off on the highway. And so I have a close friend who I remember I was driving this friend down the highway, and someone cut me off, and I remember making a sarcastic remark of, oh, look how fast you went 1 car ahead, and my friend goes, well, maybe that person's having a baby. And it suddenly disarmed me. I was like, I don't know what to say about that. I was like, well, what if it's a male driver? Well, maybe his wife is in the hospital and she's having a baby, and it makes it's funny, but there's a truth to it, in that by taking a moment to step outside of our narrative and saying, is there a way that I can see something from that person's perspective, right? That's compassion, that's empathy, and we can start to display kindness towards it, because we humanize the other person.
Yeah, and I just had a recent example with one of my clients that I was working with. I'm in real estate, where they had sent over all the necessary paperwork, and the other agent responded asking for what it seemed like the same paperwork. So they called me up. They were very frustrated, trying to understand what was going on, and I'm on this end saying, all right, let's take a deep breath. I know what we could do. I know what we could do to solve this. And I said, let's not knock the other agent. Let's come from a standpoint of maybe they just didn't understand what's going on. And now I'm going to break down the lines of communication. Long and short, the other person, the other agent just had trouble organizing and wanted specifics on the information that was sent, as opposed to just like a general paperwork that was sent. So once I cleared that, it was like, okay, like, the other, my client's like, okay, maybe she's not this nasty person who's purposely trying to make my life harder. I always come from that standpoint of like, let's break down the lines. Let's really see where these things are coming from. And I love the car example, because in Vegas, there's this thing where people, if you put your blinker on, especially on the highway, you put your blinker on, that's a signal for the other person to say, oh, I'm not letting you in. And they will do everything they can to speed up to not let you in. But I always am able to get in. They may be like they pull up 10 feet behind me, And every time I give them a nice wave, like, thank you for letting me in. And then they realize, I'm a jerk.
That's learning to defeat them with love.
Yeah. And that's why people, when they drive me, they're like, you really don't have road rage, do you? I'm like, no, because why? The only thing that's going to negatively affect is me, because then it'll cause me to have some sort of accident at some point. Like, if someone's driving, maybe they're in a hurry. I'm like, you know what? I hope they get to where they got to get to. It seems like they really need to get there. So now that we talked a lot about positivity and using that positivity, nurturing that positivity, the benefits of nurturing it, and how we can really use that, the example you gave on the philosopher, where, like, these people are trampling over the flowers and missing the maiden. You're not going to be able to find the situations you're looking for if you're not looking for them. If you have your head down dwelling on your thoughts, you're never going to be able to look up to randomly see, that person of the opposite or same gender walking down the block that you've never seen, that you would have liked to have said hi to. Maybe that was something you wanted. And I always say, when I go out to places, I always like to tell people that, I'm a real estate agent. I also have a YouTube channel. And I love saying that because I get people who are like, oh, me too. What do you talk about? Can I come on your channel? And I would never get those situations if I'm not looking for them. And I'm not positive in the fact that I want to bring that positivity to avenues like this. Now, the point of what I'm getting at, though, is negative emotions also have a very volatile way of affecting yourself. So, Jason, for someone that really doesn't understand positivity, or maybe even thinks that positivity is a hoax, which I've seen those people, what can those people do when they're in a state of negativity to really change who they are and where they're at in their lives?
If somebody wants to change, now that creates that possibility where, they might be willing to listen to something else, but it has to come from that person. No sort of change or, altering of someone's disposition is really going to come from the outside. It has to come from within. So to answer your question, it's not helpful, but it depends on the situation. I mean, if the person is open, says, hey, you know what, I'm a negative person, or they recognize that they're being negative and they want to change, now they might be interested in, hey, here's a book you should read, or here's some advice, or, if someone's caught in the moment of sadness or anger or whatever it is, well, now that's a different situation. And here I'd say no advice is going to help in that moment, because this person is charged with emotional energy. And the first thing that person needs to do is they need an avenue to discharge it, right? And so in those moments, if we really want to dialogue and not just sort of impose our advice, whatever it is, we have to sort of be an empty vessel. Let the person discharge their energy. Learn to mirror the person, saying, okay, here's what I hear you saying. Is that right? Right? Mirror the person. Even validate them to a degree. And validating doesn't mean, saying that they're right. It's simple validation. The way I define it is, here's why what you're saying is right from where you're coming from, right? Based in that person's perspective. If you're in their shoes, right? Why does that make sense to them? So through mirroring, through validating them, then you can start to empathize and go, okay, I understand why you're feeling that way. And so, and if you notice, mirroring, validation, empathy, that in none of these things are you really offering anything other than what the person has given you. So you need to so the way I do it is, and I've had this with either colleagues or students or other people, is, be an empty vessel, mirror them, validate them, allow them to discharge that emotional energy, because then now once that emotional energy is discharged, you can say, okay, now let's start to talk through it. Now we're in a place to dialogue. So
I think at the core of it for negativity, it really is expressing the negativity, like not just suppressing it. We talked about the importance of not suppressing emotions, but really accepting where you're at. And then you said it right there in the beginning. It's if you want to change. Some people sit there and they're just convinced that they can't change, and they're right. That's just kind of the base level of it. So I think it's good. And obviously, reach out to your friends, reach out to your family. Like, you know, if you have relationships that you've built upon, there's people out there that want to help you and that care for you. So make sure you reach out to them. So I feel like at the core of it, how to fight negativity obviously is with positivity and with knowing that you have the power to change.
And I also want to say, I mean, in those situations where someone doesn't want to change, what do? You know, if they're not willing to talk, I mean, there are some people who are not interested in sharing their emotions. There are people who are not interested in hearing about, you know, mindfulness or positivity or listening to advice or self-improvement. And the best thing that I would say in those situations is simply to love. You know, try to love them unconditionally, no matter how hard it is. I mean, as I've grown older and hopefully wiser in teaching philosophy and religious studies, I think that the theme that I keep coming across is that if there's anything that's our call as human beings, it's to spread unconditional love and compassion towards others, including ourselves. And I think that's really important, is, you know, not to judge others and not to judge ourselves either. You know, I think love and respect for others has to start with self-love and self-respect, you know, in recognizing that the value of our own life and human dignity, because once we find that internally, now it starts to generate outward.
I think it's a perfect sentence to end this episode on. Honestly, this was really, really good. We have one more episode with Jason, so we're very excited that he's going to be sharing some more thoughts with us. But until next time, please leave a like if you thought this video was valuable enough to share with others, and also feel free to share it with someone who you believe could use something like this, could really use a video going in and diving deep into the understanding of positive and negative thinking and what we could do to better ourselves with it. So until the next episode, we'll see you.